Catch all of it.
We've headed to the bin to get our sample full of wheat. As we filled up our bag, we got a little messy and had some cleanup to do. But we filled our bag, ready to go to the grinder. Here at the grinder, we're taking the whole kernel, which grinds up the wheat, the germ, the bran, every part of that kernel ready for our bread. It's a fine grind. Now I've just put in half a cup of warm water, 1 tablespoon of brown sugar, and I put in 4.5 teaspoons of dry active yeast. And now I just sprinkle it on the top and let it settle in and start to grow. I leave it for about 10 to 15 minutes. Put the yeast mixture in your mixing bowl. Okay, so I'm gonna top it up with this brown sugar, half a cup brown sugar, in it goes. You can also use honey here or whatever your sugar choice is. Usually I would use maple syrup. Today I'm gonna use the brown sugar and a little extra hearty flavor and sugar, about 1/4 cup of molasses. Now, if you don't like molasses, you can hold this out completely or just limit it, put in just a little bit if you like. And I actually ran out of milk today, being that I'm not shopping much right now. So I'm actually using canned milk, but normally just go ahead and use that regular milk. I have half a cup of liquid already in with the water and the yeast. So now I'm just gonna pour 3 cups of milk into this mixture. And then 2 teaspoons of salt. Now the salt is what makes the yeast stop. So it's had its time to grow, it will continue to grow, but this is what actually helps to manage the growth of the yeast as well as add that flavor to your bread. So 2 teaspoons of salt and 1/4 cup of butter. Now you can use any kind of fat. If you wanted to add yogurt in here, you could, and a little oil, something like that, but I'm just gonna use this butter. So I've got that butter in there now, and we're just gonna blend it up. So I'm gonna put it over here onto the mixer. Now I'm just gonna add a paddle to it, and then as I add the flour and this gets glutinous, the dough, I will change to a dough hook. This just kind of speeds up the mixing process. So give a little look in there. You can start adding your flour 1 cup at a time so it doesn't splash everywhere. Well, that mixes up. Now we're doing 100% whole wheat. Again, with any bread you make, you can choose what blend or combination you want of flours. You can do whole wheat, white, half whole wheat, half white, whichever you choose. Okay, so that's about our 4 cups, just to start it off working the dough. And as it starts pulling away from the edges, that's when you want to switch it to the dough hook to really let it do the majority of the finishing. So we're at 5, 6, and as it pulls together, you want to give it a little bit of time in between, and that's what's going to really give that time for that gluten to form. The more you mix bread, as biscuit dough, you don't want to overdo that biscuit dough. You want it to be light and fluffy, so you work it as little as possible. Bread dough is completely the opposite. The more time you give it, the more you work it, the better it is. Now, this whole wheat flour that we have going on from the farm will seem a little more dense than what a white flour is going to have. But you're making up for it a ton more nutrition. So I'm going to stop it here and switch to the dough hook. Got the dough hook in, and we're continuing to work it. You can see it starting to form that ball now. It does take a little while. It's a pretty heavy dough. You can go in and add a cup of white flour or 2 cups if you like, if you want a little bit lighter dough. This is a pretty hefty one, and with that molasses, it's really just a great hearty dough. This should make 2 loaves, 2 nice sized loaves if you just want one, or you could also double it, but it'd be a little harder on your mixer doubling it, being at 9 cups of flour or so. last bit. Half a cup. And now that looks about the right consistency to just leave it for about 5-6 minutes to knead. As in the old days, we'd take it out, roll it on the counter, and start kneading it. I'm going to cheat, be a little lazy on this one, and just let my mixer go for a bit. The dough is looking really good now. I'm just going to check it. So to check it, you just kind of pull at it. It comes apart nicely, but it stretches, and it's not sticking to my fingers. So it has that elasticity. Like I said, you'll see all the grains in it, all the pieces. That's whole kernel bread that I grinded for this bread. Okay, so we're going to pop that out. Okay, so while that bread is mixing up, I'm just going to go through a little bit with the farm to table. So this here is our wheat, Triumph Farms 2019. Now, as earlier in the video you saw us taking it out, filling up these bags. I then went, put it through, washed it up, put it through my mill, and turned it into flour. So we are using Triumph's wheat, whole wheat for our bread. So we have 4 cups in the mixer already, and we're going to add about another 4.5 cups depending on how much it needs. Now whole wheat, you're always going to use a little bit less because it'll absorb that much more water. It's got the bran, it's got the whole kernel. As you can see, you're not losing that. The bleached flour is what you only get a portion of the kernel, where this, I can show you compared to white, has the bran, hull, everything. It's all in there. It's highly nutritious with fiber and all kinds of vitamins that you don't get from all-purpose white flour. So that's what we're using today. So farm to table, this is going to be our wheat right in to the loaves of bread here. And kind of fitting for COVID that we can use all of our own grain and turn it into perfectly good table eating food. So let's check on this bread here that we've got going and add the rest of that flour. The gluten has been working away, so we'll add that bit and show you how the dough comes up, and then we'll pop it in the oven to let it rise. And all you do is give it a once turn in a greased bowl. So here I have a bowl. Just kind of give it a good pat down in there. Flip it over, and we'll just cover it up with saran wrap. It wants to be moist and warm to rise. So we need to leave this in the oven for about an hour at about 100 degrees, or you can just put it on in the oven with your light on, and that will keep it warm. So we just cover it all up, and then we pop it into the oven here. Okay, so we've taken our bread dough out of the oven. It's risen right to the top, pushing on the plastic, which is perfect. And now you just want to squish it. You want to get all that air out of there, and then you let it rest for 10 minutes. I know bread is a bit of a process. There's different kinds of bread. There's batter bread, there's no knead bread, but we're going with good old traditional here. Okay, so that looks pretty firm. We've knocked it down. You can see it's obviously not near the top again. Now we just go ahead and cover that up. It needs to rest for just 10 minutes. Just to relax all those glutens again. And we just leave that on the counter 10 minutes. After it's rested, just beat it down again. Fold it in one big loaf. Cut it in half. And then just shape it into your loaf pans. You can give your pans a little spray with canola oil so that they don't stick. And then just form them. Into a loaf, making sure you get all the air out of them. You want them to re-rise. Somewhat even. They're not perfect, that's okay. Just plunk them in there, give them a good pat. Same thing, tend to go out from the edges and roll it bring it in from the edges, roll it. Into a nice loaf. Put them in there. Give them a little pat down so they rise out of your pan. And cover that up. And that way, not like the saran, where the saran will keep it kind of contained. This will allow it to rise to whatever it wants. And then we just cover it up. And back into the oven it goes for about 45 minutes to double up again. All right, so after 40 to 45 minutes, pull your bread out. Uncover it gently. See, they've risen nicely. And we're just gonna pop them now in the oven at 400 degrees for about 30 minutes. 30 to 40, depending on how big your loaves are. Here they go. Now that's what I call a delicious use of farm wheat.